Ciao, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of Growth Talks. And my guest today is a super guest. I have the honor to have with me for a chat, Ignacio Gallegos. Hi, Ignacio. How are you today?
Good, man. Pronunciation was on spot. Nice to see you, Rafael. It's been a minute. Nice to see you again. I think we were just chatting before about like maybe 3-4 years since I attended that conference in Milano.
Yeah. Wow, it was a lot. It was probably 2018 or 2019. I don't remember. With the whole pandemic in the middle,
Oh yeah,
my memory just went.
yeah. It
Yeah,
was a
yeah.
good time. It was definitely a good time. I remember at the time I was doing this talk in your conference was like debullshitizing growth, and I think
I loved
I,
it.
I was really excited about doing it because I was also listening to like your other podcast episode and when you were talking with the guys from Matt Espresso and so on, and they were saying that in Italy there's some sort of like a narrative that is very kind of like Silicon Valley based and very kind of like exitist, and I really wanted to kind of like stand on that stage and like go in the other direction. So it was good fun.
Yeah. I remember the talk. I loved it. And today, sometimes I still send it to some friends or
Oh,
colleagues or people that are new in the whole growth scene. And I don't know. It's a great recap. I think so. Yeah, I
that's
loved
good,
it.
man. I
It
think
was great.
probably I see things very differently from that time to now, but I might rewatch it at some point. Let's see.
Cool. So let's start with with a simple one, with a classic. So a quick intro. Tell
Yeah.
us about yourself. What you do, about what's your background, what you love, and stuff like that.
Yeah, perfect. So my name is Ignacio Gallegos, as you were saying. Most people call me Nacho, so that's totally fine. Exactly like the chips. I know it freaks some people out, but there's nothing wrong about it. It's a normal nickname. I come from Chile originally, and I've been based in Amsterdam for about the last 6 years. My background is actually very different for a marketer. I started in audio engineering. I was in recording studios, and that was kind of like my passion when I first came out of school and started going into college. So I started recording in like different studios for like movies and music and stuff like that, and I really loved it. But also at some point I realized that I'm more like a family dude with like normal working hours and kind of like with more stability. And I realized that that kind of like really late hours and like zero stability environment wasn't doing me any favors. That I should probably do it as a hobby, but not as something that would like put money on the table, like food on the table, right? So I did an MBA afterwards, and I just pivoted over my career over to marketing, which I've been doing for the last 15, 12 years or something like that. I lose track. I've worked at several scale ups and startups here in the Netherlands, like most noticeably like Katawiki, which is a large auction site here based in Amsterdam. Then I moved over to a company called Trend Watching, which is, like trend insights for like large corporations. It was a really interesting project. Then I was the CMO at a business called Starred, which does candidate experience feedback for recruiters. Was a really an interesting niche, and we went through a business pivot that was super interesting also, and a great learning experience for me. And now I am leading the marketing team at Whereby. And for those that are not familiar with Whereby it's the most loved real-time video solution out there. So basically, we have two main products. You have Meetings and you have Embedded. Meetings is the product we're the most known for because we started with that product over in 2013. So with Meetings, you can basically have video calls straight in your browser with no hassle, simple links, great, beautiful, award-winning interface that loved by millions. And now we're taking that experience with Embedded into people's products, right? So you can bring our API and all of our technology into your product, so you can have conversations in real time with your customers, and you can customize it to what you need to make it work, but still leveraging our interface that's loved by so many and all of our infrastructure, and don't have to worry about all of that complex stuff. So it's been a great journey at Whereby. Now it's going to be about a year. So that's a little summary.
Yeah, cool, pretty cool. By the way, I love Whereby and I use Whereby. And I think I have a couple of questions about that. But before moving to Whereby,
Yeah.
I was wondering, since you have been in Amsterdam for so long, I remember being in Amsterdam in 2016.
Mm.
I attended it was the Growth Tribe Academy,
Yeah.
and I remember the growth scene in Amsterdam was crazy. It was growing a lot. It was probably the main city in Europe for the whole
Yeah.
growth stuff. Is it the same today as well?
Yeah, I think it's kept blooming. In general, something that's also happened with the pandemic that's a bit hard is that you've lost visibility of that, right? Like it used to be like an event every 2 weeks, or just like
Yeah.
be in like really like in-person things going on all the time. And with that going away, and people also trying to stay away from their computers in their off time, kind of like I might have lost a little bit of visibility on that. but there's certainly a lot of like massive tech scale ups that have like set their base in Amsterdam. It's a great pool of talent that you have here. You have people from all over the world coming here. So I think it's still, together with like Paris, London, Berlin, maybe, right? Like it's one of the main tech hubs in Europe. And I think it's for good reason, right? It offers that great balance for folks that want to relocate here, about like kind of like village vibe with big city perks kind of thing. There's a great quality of life. There's a ton of like fantastic work. So I think it's going to keep going in that direction. There's also tax reasons for it, but we don't have to dwell into this. Like they have good relocation situations for foreigners and stuff like that. But in general, yeah, I think it's a great place to be if you work in tech.
Cool. That's like the right balance. Yeah, that's probably the
It's not as
reason.
overwhelming as a London or a Paris, right? It's
Mm,
you get that smaller city vibe with
yeah,
with the good opportunities.
yeah. I was wondering, as I said before, I love Whereby. I use Whereby, and I started using Whereby way before the pandemic. Probably was 2018 or 2019, something like that.
Nice.
Uh, and this is a market, where you have like huge player like Zoom and Meet and Teams. These big corps and
Yeah.
Microsoft and Google and stuff. But you guys did something really, I don't know, amazing. How is it possible that in a huge market with huge competitors, or with
Mhm.
tools like Zoom that have been here for like decades, you were able to find your niche and to grow and to build something really, I don't know, that was, as you said before, loved by millions of people. How was the
Yeah.
whole process?
I mean, I cannot take credit for a lot of the groundwork that was done at Whereby before I joined, right? Because I think a lot of that groundwork was done before my time, and there were some great people behind it, like that still are in the org. But I think, as you said, like very well, like the company find a niche on people that really appreciate the attention to detail that we have in our product. That like it's hard to put into words, right? Whereby is one of those products that if somebody says, "Hey, why this exactly better than the other solution?" It's hard to explain because there are things that you just see when you experience it. Like if you use it a lot, you're gonna be noticing those things that make the experience much more enjoyable than using different solutions. But if you look at things in paper, like a 5-second comparison table, you're not gonna be able to find a lot of things that would like lean the balance one or the other, because as you said, it's a highly busy market, right, with a ton of players. I think the company also has strong values and a mission, that it's super important for the people that uses us. Like we have a commitment with the environment, with privacy, with user experience and things of that sort, that people really value and that come across, right? So it's by no means an easy market, right? Like it's not a market where you can say like anybody, it's like comfortably sitting, right? It's a market that requires you to constantly evolve and to constantly find new ways to engage in your audience and add value through the product, especially because we went through this pandemic peak down situation in for products like us and many others, right? We're seeing it even in products like from e-commerce, from the Shopify's to like the hop-ins in virtual events, like several different things that have gone through this pandemic roller coaster where you have to find, okay, where is my baseline after this whole thing kind of like hit us. um so yeah, I think it is an ongoing mission for us. It is an ongoing mission for us to have an audience that really sees the values in what we see the value in, like really that attention to detail of providing a great experience. And so far we've been successful at that, and hopefully that will keep being the case. Yeah.
From my point of view, it's all about the UX. I
Hmm.
mean, the problem with the tools that I was mentioning before is that most of the time the UX is really bad.
Yeah.
It's the same one that they had in, I don't know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
It's the
You
joy of the little details, right?
yeah, you did a great work on that. So that's probably
Oh,
one of
I
the main
didn't though. I
reasons.
want to give a good
I mean,
shout
I
out
mean,
to everybody
I
in
mean,
the
yeah,
Whereby
yeah,
product team. Yeah,
yeah.
because I cannot
The
take
whole
credit for that.
the whole thing, yeah, the
But
whole
but I think you have people at Whereby that have a deep passion for these things. Like often that comes with like big trade-offs, right? Like sometimes you spend a lot of time and resources on things that you wonder whether people are going to appreciate them. But I think we've been seeing over time that people do appreciate that attention to detail and experience.
You were talking about the whole pandemic roller coaster before.
Mm.
Uh, how was that? I suppose was pretty crazy. How was that, and how is the situation now in a
Yeah.
company like yours, where the curve was like this?
Yeah. I joined the business kind of like when the pandemic was kind of the pandemic effect was kind of wearing off, and the pandemic was about to stop. I think like in July last year. So
Mm,
the business grew significantly during that time, and we scaled and we hired quite a lot more people at the time. But we also always knew that there was some of that was going to stick, and some of that wasn't going to stick. Like that was only natural, right? So we kind of like tried to make preparations to make sure that we were adjusting our business for when that happened. And it's come with a lot of like changes. It's come with a lot of like, we've like restructured teams, we've like shift priorities, we've done a lot of like different things to kind of adjust to that ongoing dance that's still ongoing, right? But we truly believe that the world now, for better, I believe it's a permanently hybrid, right? Our mission used to be with meetings like to enable people to work from anywhere. Our
yeah.
mission right now is to enable a world in which anywhere works, right? Like whether you want to get access to learning, telehealth,
Mm,
events, anything you want to access shouldn't be conditioned by where you live, right? And shouldn't be accessible only for the people that live in the big cities, right? So even though we've come, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of articles, like companies are coming back to the office just to keep having video calls, right? No matter which situation, there's going to be some sort of hybridness going around, on which you're going to be in a call. Maybe 4 people went to the office, but a few didn't. And maybe a few people are in another country. And you're always going to need kind of like that hybrid thing. And it's the same thing for businesses, like for doctors' offices or event companies, right? You're always going to have that hybrid scenario next to the real life scenario.
mm,
So I think the world is kind of adjusting to that reality, but I don't see that going from, fully in person to fully remote to fully in person back, right? I think we're going to land somewhere in the middle for the long haul.
mm, mm, mm. And so I suppose in a in a situation like the one you just described, probably most of the work that you are doing right now is on retention instead of acquisition, right?
Yeah, very much. I, for me personally, it's a topic that I find really really interesting. I know that often, right? Like I'm a marketer by trade. I'm not a product person. Those boundaries have kind of like blended, I guess, over the years with like growth and all of these sort of like new disciplines. But um, I think retention is one. It's obviously what kills or makes businesses, especially in SaaS, right? Like if you have poor retention, there's no way you're gonna sustainably just keeping it going with just acquisition and just that bucket keep leaking. Eventually, you have to face those issues, and every SaaS business out there struggles with retention at one point or another, right? That's normal. Personally, I feel what's interesting for me, like when I started in this whole growth thing, and I was also a part of the growth tribe before, right? And I also did some courses with them and stuff like that. Back then, it was like you were like looking at the funnel, which a lot of people say is a flywheel. Whether it's a funnel, it's a flywheel. Like who the hell cares? Whatever geometric shape we want to give it, right? But basically, um, you were looking at it very compartmentalized, and you were saying, well, this top of the funnel belongs to marketing. Then at the middle is when product kicks in, and then you have either customer success, and then the other. What realistically I think every business should kind of like start doing way more is that funnel has a stakeholder of every department all across, because when growth became a thing, people were hiring heads of growth, right? Or chief growth officers, and they were saying the growth department owns the entire funnel. And all that did like piss people off, right? Like realistically, because you're going to be saying you have a functioning product function, a functioning marketing department, and then you put something on top of it that says like, no, but these guys actually own the whole thing. That is not very very easy to work out. Like nobody like really liked that idea. Realistically, you want to make sure that you have groups of cross-functional people across every stage of the funnel, because obviously when you talk about retention, there are things that marketing cannot influence, because like if it's engagement with the product itself, then you are going to need product managers to take ownership of the execution of that. But retention also is heavily impacted by engagement and resurrection, and that's something that you heavily impact with channels like email, or even with the messaging that you use and things of that sort, right? So marketing can definitely contribute a lot. And even more importantly, what a lot of people miss is the link between retention and acquisition. Like everything you learn about your retention should guide how you do acquisition, because
Mm,
what happens often, right, is like you have pressure from the top saying, hey, we need those 1,000 trials to be 4,000, and then you're incentivized to just drive any possible person through that process, even though you know that you're paying or acquiring people through a lot of effort that might not even engage with your product in the long haul. Realistically, what you want to do is like narrow down your acquisition to the people that you know have the right profile or need, to be actively engaged with your product. That might mean that you have to set expectations with your team and be like, listen, we're not going to have 4 bazillion trials. We're going to have a lower amount, but I'm highly confident that they're going to be much more engaged than the ones that we were acquiring before, therefore increasing our lifetime value, decreasing our CAC, and like overall creating good for the entire business, right? But you have to fight that short-term mentality in the beginning of like, we need more at the top of the funnel, right? Which is not easy when you're sitting in a marketing position.
Yeah, that's pretty classic situation.
Yeah.
Uh, is there, like, I don't know, a mistake that you see, keeping on, the retention topic, a mistake that SaaS companies always do when it's, time to work on retention?
Yeah, I think like, I think it's starting from the tactics, basically, right? Like, and it's the same thing with every funnel stage, right? Like, ideally, you want to start from the strategy and like lay down like a great foundation and really understand what's going on, right? Like, let's put an acquisition example. When it comes to like acquisition experiments, I personally, a lot of people do experiments, and the goal of your experiments are to hit a certain goal in a key metric. I want to increase revenue. I want to increase this or the other. Where I find the most like impactful experiments to be are not so much about hitting that ultimate output, are about like gathering the learnings that are going to help us hit that output consistently. So if I can test something that will make me more sure that the assumptions I'm making about my users are correct, then that I can use that intelligence that now I know is correct into everything I do to maximize results, as opposed to doing one hack without having that foundation in mind, just because to see if I can get more people to go from here to here with a clickbaity headline, right? And that will give me like a significant like spike that goes away within 2 weeks and never comes back, right? So with retention, it's very similar. People start thinking about ways, oh, how can we make people like cancel less? And then people start thinking about incentives like, do we need to make it harder to cancel? Do we need to like, make it more hidden so people are not like, and you interviewed Rand on your last episode, like Rand Fishkin, right? And I'm a big fan of his as well. And with Spark Toro, his business, right? Like done the complete opposite. They make it extremely easy to cancel. Like they even encourage you to cancel.
I love it.
if you're not using it enough, right? Because realistically, why do you want to keep like unhappy users just to like basically bloat your metrics, right? So a problem I see right away is that people try to jump to the solution and not try to like validate right away like the persona, the use case, and the strategy before jumping to the tactics.
Yeah, that's true. And you said that the most important part is to understand what you did wrong, so the key learnings, and keep track of them. How do you do that? I know it's probably a silly question, but how do you do that? I mean, is it like a Google Doc with the rest of the team, a Notion page, a spreadsheet? I mean, what's the best way to keep track of the learnings, sharing with the team, and then start a process where you actually analyze the information to get better?
Yeah, I don't think it's a silly question at all. I think it's a massive issue, and you see a ton of companies like even building solutions for this lately, right? Like there's a lot of companies that are kind of like building like user research repositories or thing of that sort. And I don't know if I have like the final answer for you. I think it's something that we and like every company out there struggles with, right? Like because when every department is learning from users, from marketing to customer success and so on, to like condense that information in a single source of truth and pass it along without it being absolutely overwhelming, because you also don't want to send, hey, here are like 700 pages of interviews with like 4 hours, like 4-hour interviews of people and things like that. People are not going to watch them realistically, right? And then also, who decides who plays God and kind of like just condenses that into smaller bits, because by the single exercise of condensing it, like you're biasing that information. Right? You have a human looking at it and like distilling it and making like conclusions, and in that process you already lose some information that you might have gotten if another person looked at that same video or at that same interview. So I don't think I have a final answer for it. I think all companies continually struggle and strive to try to make it. So some people put them in a Notion doc, in a Google Drive. For some people, it's some sort of like visual representation of this. I honestly have never reached a place where I'm like, this is the golden nugget and I'm going to share it with the world because I found the solution for this. Not really. It is a constant struggle, and you also see disparity of information. Like sometimes you have some insights that your peers don't, And
Yeah.
because they don't have them, then you're having a conversation in which you guys are kind of like talking about different things just by the sheer fact that you don't know something that I know. So access to those customer insights across teams are extremely relevant. And I think they're a struggle for every business. We're a 100% remote business, right?
Mm.
There's only four of us in Amsterdam, so I barely see people face to face, and you also don't want to have like meetings every day. It is a challenge, right? We have our ways and we try to document it, but by no means we can claim to have reached the holy grail here.
Okay. I hope you had a solution, so I will
No,
keep looking.
yeah, me too, man. If somebody finds it, share it with me.
Yeah, let us know in the comments.
Do let us know. Yeah.
Yeah, it is true. It's true. It's a big challenge. It's a big challenge. You said earlier something that I loved. Growth at the beginning was a lot about, oh, I want to grow the whole funnel,
Mm.
and you said we should, shift the focus from the funnel to the company. Everyone working together. Can we go deeper a little on this?
Yeah, I think you also want to shift the focus from the function to the goal, right? Like
Mm,
like for example, like I remember when I first started doing growth, right? Like maybe I'm mistaken, so anybody in the audience can correct me, but the way I perceived it when I first started like getting familiar with the topic is it was mostly happening around the marketing function,
mm,
right? So you had books like from Ryan Holiday, like growth hacking, and then like others started coming in, and it seemed to like when we were doing the courses at Growth Tribe, like the majority of people were marketers, and it felt like that growth was like in the marketing function. Very much slowly, and given the fact that retention plays a massive role as well in like actually influencing growth and not only acquisition, right? Like we started seeing that role shifting over to product, and then all of a sudden product-led growth came in, and now we have a new lingo for it, that puts once again the name of a team in there, right? Like, which is tricky. And then you have people writing books about customer success led revenue, right? And things of that sort. So there's this kind of like need of like people to kind of like make their function more relevant than the goal, and create lingo and software around that to like make sure that we, and feed all this content marketing to us, so we all kind of like feel like that's where the growth is. Realistically, I think that should be completely decoupled from the function.
mm,
And you have basically, acquisition, retention, monetization, and in each one of those stages, there should be key stakeholders from every department. You can assign an owner, and sometimes maybe in a company, the ultimate accountable person for retention will be the chief product officer, and acquisition, the chief marketing officer. But that doesn't mean that there are not several stakeholders from marketing
yeah.
involved in the monetization and retention efforts, and the other way around as well, right? And I think that's where companies kind of like, people kind of hold on and say like, this is my part of the funnel, when realistically that's very, very ineffective and really not productive, right? Because you're going to need those multiple disciplines to influence. Because think about it from a user perspective, the user does not give a shit who's owning a certain part of the funnel, right? They come in and they see the experience with you as a single entity, right? They're not like, oh, now I went from Rafaela to Ignacio's domain. No, they are like, I want this experience to be fluid, and then you have to have that cross functionality
Mm.
to make sure that that's invisible to the user. That's only an internal thing.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And do you think this is a problem only for, big companies, or this is important even for startups, and small companies?
I think even for startups, because and this is where we also live in the era of like content marketing, right? Which is like our bread and butter for marketers right now. And all of these vendors and so on, there's such a flood of like content and influencers and things like that, that startups also have a big tendency of like over indexing on the opinions of people that have done it,
Mm,
right? So you say, ooh, X person was in PayPal, Amazon, Facebook, and they grew it there. So whatever that person says is gospel to all of us, the little people, right? And then we all fall in kind of like that, following that mantra. So if that person publishes a blog post on which they say, you know, whatever, I can think like, revenue, inverted revenue funnel, then everybody's going to be like, oh my God, we need to think about in those terms. And like, it's going to start preaching it about it in the company and things like that. So small businesses are very susceptible to kind of like just trying to mimic what businesses that have done it
mm,
already are getting there. And in that path, you lose a lot of your critical thinking. You lose a lot of like thinking, okay, that sounds fantastic, but realistically, this has nothing to do with what I need right now or
Yeah,
my
that's
users read right now. I'm just kind of like ticking a box here as opposed to like actually thinking, you know.
That's so true. Sometimes I have the feeling, I don't know if you have the same, but sometimes I have the feeling that, in there was like a first era of the whole growth movement. It was all about the hacks.
Yeah.
Now we are like in a, second wave of the growth movement. It's all about the buzzwords. So, every couple of months there is someone with a new funnel techniques and and content, as you said before, and everyone
Yeah.
is following. Oh, this is the new shit now. Everyone has to do this. I don't know
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
have the same feeling.
No, 100%. And I try to stay away as much as I can from that, right? Like there's these discussions you see in social media about like the MQL is dead, right? Like if you think about it, like the MQL is a term that is drastically defined by how you define the criteria to make an MQL. So, right, if your criteria for MQL were disastrous and they added no value for the business, then that is obviously dead, and it has always been dead because it's a disastrous business decision. It was never alive, right? But if you define them well, whether you call them MQLs, PQLs, funnels, flywheels, who cares, right? Like at the end of the
Yeah,
day, what is behind the rationale and the business strategy is what has always mattered, right? So like
yeah,
you can call them whatever you want, you can call them ponies, right? Like it doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, if the rationale behind it is the right one, that's what really matters, right? But marketers, and I guess like people in general working in tech, we have this tendency of like jumping on the trend, being the first one that, and you see it like with Web3 or NFTs, right? Like I need to jump that boat, right? Because that's the boat that's the fastest right now. So Web3, and if tomorrow is whatever, you'll see people that'll jump on every one of those boats. But realistically, businesses grow businesses that grow well have really strong fundamentals and have really strong strategy. And no matter what lingo we use, those
yeah,
fundamentals haven't drastically changed, right? They have changed as much as the markets have changed, and they've adapted to that, but they haven't changed in essence.
yeah. It's always mindset before the tactics and hypes and buzzwords. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, And staying on the retention topic,
Mhm.
what you guys did, cool in the last year? I don't know, some, cool experiments or something that, was pretty working really well, something that you want to share.
Yeah, in general, I believe the biggest way a company grows is not by doing like a couple of cool things that create this massive impact. It's really by incremental gains through through your experimentation, right? That you're gonna like add a little more value here, a little more value there, and a little more value over there. I think what we've realized quite a lot, especially now that we are also growing our business with embedded, with our product that is more, like focused on larger B2B companies and developers and technical
Mm,
folks and stuff like that, uh, is to really the importance of understanding your users and making sure that you don't put your goals over what they actually need, right?
mm,
Like that you allow them to buy the way they want to buy, that you don't try to push them to a stage that they don't want to be in just to like make your metrics look better, right? That you're making sure that you're always user centric and you're always providing them. And sometimes that comes at the detriment of some of your like short term results, right? Like when you have a product that both of our products work with like a freemium model, right? So, and they're fairly powerful in their free versions, right? Like meetings and
mm,
embedded both are really powerful in their free versions. There's a lot of people that could get a ton of value without ever paying us a penny, right? But we've never really thought that it's a wise move to kind of like just block people from using them to just get them to just increase the percentage of people that are monetized. We need to add enough value to the people that see the value in being monetized to grow with us and like stay with us for long and just grow and grow, as opposed to trying to force everybody into a paying contract that they might not need it, and that they still act as ambassadors for the business and spreading the word and like, so in general, that's the way we try to approach our retention efforts, like making sure that we remain user centric and
mm.
that we are not letting our internal constraints getting in the way of the user experience, right? And I think that's been a super interesting learning for us. Like, you know for example, like another important growth, like when you experiment with things, right? Like you create internal hassle, right? Like your tracking breaks, when you add new plans, your billing goes into trouble. Then you have to like keep these legacy plans and then the new plans. There's so many things that change when you do these experiments. And if you look at it in that way, you go like, okay, well, let's really think before we do this, because that's going to be a pain to actually let all those customers know that now there's a new pricing or whatever. But realistically, if you're not willing to deal with that internal pain and you sacrifice trying new things because you don't want to make your internal issues uncomfortable, then you really start sacrificing your users for like the peace of mind of your internal team. And I think that's something that we've been pushing the boundaries on. Like, no matter how uncomfortable this change might be for us internally, we need to make sure that we're serving users in the best possible way.
Can I ask you something on that? Because sometimes I feel that I'm a huge fan of the whole, user-centric approach. But if you open, I don't know, any website today, SaaS company, marketing agency, everybody says that, they are user-centric.
Yeah.
But they don't most of the time. They say it, but they don't. So let's keep it real. What does it mean? I mean, if someone today is listening to this podcast and say, okay, that's right, I want to be a user-centric company, where do I start? What does
let me
it
give you
mean?
let me give you an example, right? Like, a lot of companies go through pivots on going from like a sales motion to like a PLG motion and things of that sort, right? Look at me using all the lingo I was criticizing 2 minutes before, but it's the lingo we use. So in general, when you do that, there's a ton of pain, right? Because basically, when you open the door for like a freemium model or something like that, you're gonna have a ton of people that were paying you before that they're actually gonna fall on your free tier, right? And you have a conscious option there to say, well, this is going to hurt our revenue in the short term, but that's what users really want. We really want them to have an experience on which they grow slowly with us, as opposed to having to like go in a big commitment up front, right? And that's where companies need to put their money where their mouth is, right? That's where companies are. And when you see companies making this decision, and I think a company like us, if you've seen the decisions we've made, you're going to realize, yeah, in some areas, we also have to monetize our product. So we have to be conscious of that. But mostly, we haven't made a ton of changes that sacrifice the experience of like the user base as a whole, just to increase our monetization or like to, it look better in our like top line metrics in the short term. Because we strongly believe that in the longer term, which is what truly matters, being that user centric and being able to like take a hit on some decisions is what's going to take you there, right? And I think that's like, you're always going to notice that in companies, and obviously you see this internally, right? You're not going to be able to see this in the outward facing things. You might, if you're experienced, you might see the signals, right? But when you're working in a company, you're going to realize when people really are like from the mouth out, or they're really like walking the talk, right? And that's one of the things I love about Whereby. I think like we really do put them first. And I'm sure for like every colleague watching this, right? Like, I'm sure like some people, we've had discussions, right? Like, I'm in a commercial department, and then there are people that don't mind so much about the commercials, and I sometimes try to pull for that balance. But at the end of the day, usually the user triumphs in our decision making.
Yeah, I love it. This is a great takeaway, I think. Yeah, I love it. I'm always curious to know, what my guests have learned recently. So, what's something really important that you learned in the last, I don't know, year? An experiment, or a failure. An insight from your customers. Something that you say, okay, this is the most important thing that I learned, in the last couple of months or so.
I'm going to approach it from two angles. One of them is going to be not so much on the marketing front, but on the management front. For those people that have to manage people, like that's where I also have kind of like steered my career more into like a management position than like an IC. I think learning to be kind and candid at the same time, it's extremely powerful. I have a tendency to be more kind than candid, right? Like, I try to like be nice to people and like never kind of like getting like tough conversations. In the past few years, I've really learned to kind of like have more of those tough conversations, and like kind of like making tough decisions also when it's needed, right? And I think no matter how your company values are structured or whatever, like in a startup, you're always going to face those situations when you have to like make tough calls. and being able to make tough calls while remaining kind, it's super important, right? Like I tend still to go more toward the kind space than the candid one, but I'm really making strides there. Um, and from a business perspective, I think the importance of, we have a product that you could say it really useful for like everyone in the world, right? Because like from my mom to anybody, you're having calls online all the time. Nonetheless, there's an extreme importance in focus, in saying, okay, this is the tribe that we can serve the best. This is the reduced group of people that we can actually make extremely happy. And even though this could be used by a wider array of people, we really need to focus on this without the FOMO of missing out on the other, because that FOMO is always there. There's like revenue opportunities around the corner for businesses like us. But the value of like executing more narrowly into a space, right, which we've struggled with, right? And I think we're always kind of like going on and off from. I think that's something that, particularly when you're in a business, because a lot of businesses right now are very narrow and very niche businesses because of this reason, because you can be successful. Our business is very wide and can serve a variety of use cases. Still in that situation, especially when you have a small team, you really need to narrow down your positioning and focus to be successful.
That's an important takeaway for people and companies saying my target is everyone. So
Yeah, right. Like we could literally say that, right? Like our target is like everybody older than like 13 years old or something, right?
yeah, so,
But you need to at some point find that point.
yeah. So even if you think that your target is everyone, you're wrong. That's
No,
the thing.
at least you have everyone working for you as well, and you can prioritize everybody equally, right? Otherwise, you're just going to be wildly ineffective.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. In the final part of these interviews, these chats, we usually talk about books and tools.
Mm,
So I want to start with books.
okay.
I love books. People here on the podcast love reading. So do you have any cool books that you have read in the last, I don't know, couple of months or in the last year? Uh,
Yeah,
Business books, but whatever. I mean, if you have something cool, just share with us.
I've been consciously trying to steer away a bit from business books, but some books that I've really enjoyed over the last few years or months. Alchemy by Rory Sutherland is one of my favorite books. Rory Sutherland
Mm,
works at Ogilvy, and it's one of my favorite books because in an attribution data obsessed world, it shows, kind of like predictably irrational, like it just shows how irrational our consumer
mm,
behaviors are, and how we should never lose track of like that kind of like unmeasurable magic that marketing can bring to the table, right? Like how emotional purchases or things that just completely make zero sense actually drive people behavior. And I always find that really inspiring when you're looking at like trying to see every data point where everybody comes from, to kind of like have a refresher of like, well, people are widely unpredictable, and no
yeah.
matter how advanced your data models are, you need to still market with that in mind, and not just thinking that you have a bunch of robots that predictably are going to convert at a 3% conversion rate on every click, right? Because when you think about marketing in that way, it just kills it for me, right? Like if I
Yeah,
thought about it all that time in that way, I just wouldn't be doing marketing. It's just boring for me,
yeah.
right? I'm not that analytical.
What,
uh,
what's the, what's the name again? Sorry, of the book.
Alchemy by
Okay,
Rory Sutherland.
okay.
So
I'll leave the link in the description. Okay.
check it out. Maybe a few others. Obviously, Awesome by April Dunford. I think it's one of the most like fun, easily digestible books on positioning, which we were
Mm,
also talking about. And positioning, I think it's a key part of marketing strategy, which, don't get me wrong, I struggle with every single day. But
what do
it's
you mean?
something that with positioning, like I just said, narrowing down is important. I struggle with it. There's no
Mm,
question, right? It's not that I'm kind of like saying that we do it perfectly, but I think books like this keep you kind of like thinking. I try to reread it once in a while to kind of remember that. And as a manager, maybe The Effective Executive, but by Peter Drucker, is an oldie but a goodie, I think. So in that book, you can also learn. It's a book. I'm gonna go on a limb here and say it's from the 50s. I'm not sure,
mm,
but it's really really interesting if you're struggling with like prioritizing management work and understanding what to delegate, what to do yourself, and like really understand how to manage your time. In terms of other resources, blogs, maybe the Reforge blog is one that I check often. I think they really create a lot of value without a lot of the fluff. I think that's super important. Newsletters, I really like Why We Buy from Caitlin Borgwan. I know if I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, Caitlin, forgive me, but it's really interesting about consumer behavior as well,
Mhm.
and the things that Alchemy talks about. And then there's another newsletter that I really like that's called ARI. So it's ARIYH by Thomas McKinley, which is like research-based insights about marketing, which
Wow,
are
sounds good.
really, that one's super interesting as well. But I try to not overwhelm myself with too much content because
Yeah.
otherwise the FOMO kicks in and things get tough.
Yeah, yeah. I have a quick one about the classics. You mentioned a book
Mm.
by Peter Drucker. What's your opinion about classics? I know in the whole marketing world there is like part of it that say, okay, you have to read the classics. Even if you start today, you have to read, I don't know, Seth Godin and
Hmm.
and all the classics are. But there are people that say, okay, it doesn't make any sense to read in 2022 the Purple Cow or stuff like that, and it's old, so just go on new stuff. What's your opinion on that?
I'm an old fart, so I'm gonna go on the old route. I believe one of the problems in marketing in tech today is that a lot of the people that started marketing careers in like the 2000s, right, that were like very young folks, a lot of them don't even have like a proper marketing background or education on like the fundamentals of marketing. A lot of
Mm,
them think that marketing is paid ads or is social media, right, without understanding the fundamentals about marketing strategy, research, positioning, and several other things. So I do think that there are some books that are absolutely timeless and that people should read them, especially when it comes to marketing, especially when it comes to younger folks, right? I obviously this is the thing, right? Like when you read anything, a book from a blog post, you need to add the context of your own experience and the time you're living in, right? So if I read a book from Peter Drucker and he says something that I can make the rationale and say, well, that doesn't apply to today, right? Like we all have that critical thinking in us to like see what you keep and what you say, okay, this one doesn't fly today, right? But I think that's what people miss, that people read a lot of books and content in general as kind of like prescriptions. So they want to like execute everything to the letter. If you read books like that, then you are going to have that mindset because some of the older books, you're not going to be able to do that
yeah,
in your new startup. But if you actually take the fundamentals of it, you can leverage them for 20, 30, 40 more years.
yeah, that's the key. We are always looking for the silver bullet, the recipe, the in books, but that's not the reason why we should read.
No,
So yeah.
you're gonna keep looking forever. So
Yeah.
don't spend too much time on that one.
What about tools? Do you have any cool marketing tools that you have been using lately that you want to share with us?
Yeah, I'm not a massive tool guy. I know there's a ton of marketers that are like always in the look for the next thing. I find it a bit, I don't a bit boring, to be honest. If I could do everything with a sheet, like I would do everything with a sheet. But one of the tools that I've used recently that I like is called Brightback, and it's also on the retention
Right
topic.
back.
So it
Okay.
allows you to create kind of like um, cancellation journey. So when your users are canceling, you can offer them different resources and
Oh, cool.
different offers, and then you can also survey them. And I think they show the data of when you have millions of users, right, and you have like large sets of data, they manage to show the data in a way that's very digestible and kind of like gives you a lot of insights about why people are stopping with your product. And also what's really interesting is a lot of people cancel and they say they would actually come back eventually, right? And so you can kind of like get the difference between people that cancel out of like circumstances but love the product versus people that just cancels because they hate you, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that one I find really interesting. I think it was recently acquired by ChargeBee, if I'm not mistaken.
Cool. Cool. Nice. Thanks. So, this is the end. Do you wanna leave with some links where they can read you, follow you? Like I don't know, blogs, Twitters, and stuff that you
Oh
wanna.
man, I'm bad about this, but if you want to hear me rant a bit more, I used to have a podcast called Growth Pains. I did it like as a pandemic project, and I rant about a lot of things there. So if you want to hear some more ranting, then that could be the place. I try to be a bit more active in social, but I don't know, maybe it's a post-pandemic effect, but I've been falling off of it for a while. But if you want to follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever, you can just type my name and find me. It's not a very common name.
Cool. Perfect. Thanks. I leave all the links in the description. Ignacio, it was really, really great having you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate seeing you. Hopefully, we'll catch up in Italy at some point soon.
Hope so. Bye.
Bye, mate. Ciao.